Christmas had always been a magical time for me, but that year felt different from the very beginning. It was the first Christmas we were supposed to spend with my husband's family, an attempt to finally blend into the home he grew up in. His parents' house looked picture-perfect from the outside, shimmering lights wrapped around the railing, a giant wreath hanging on the door, and soft music drifting through the windows. Inside, the living room was full of cheerful chaos as everyone chatted loudly, exchanged jokes, and warmed their hands near the glowing fireplace. Platters of food covered every table, and the sweet smell of cinnamon and roasted turkey filled the air. They welcomed us politely, but as the night went on, I started sensing something strange, something cold, hidden beneath the festive atmosphere. People smiled, but their eyes often traveled past me, as if I wasn't entirely part of their world. I brushed it off, believing the warmth of the evening would slowly melt away that feeling. But while everyone sat comfortably, taking group pictures and sipping hot chocolate, I noticed something that made my heart skip a beat. My daughter Lily wasn't with them. I glanced around the room again, thinking maybe she was behind someone or playing quietly with a cousin. But I didn't see her anywhere, not near the tree, not by the fireplace, not with the other kids. A mother's instinct hits like a spark, sudden and sharp. Something felt wrong. Even the warmth of the fireplace no longer mattered. The laughter around me began to blur as my heartbeat grew louder. I stood up, scanning the room one more time before stepping out of the living room. That simple moment, when she wasn't where she should have been, was the beginning of the Christmas that changed everything. When I asked the family where Lily might be, their reactions were unsettling. My mother-in-law waved her hand dismissively without even turning her head. "She's around somewhere," she murmured, more invested in retelling some story than acknowledging my concern. One of my husband's nephews shrugged, saying he thought he saw her near the hallway a while ago. My husband simply said, "She's fine," as if that solved the problem. But a mother doesn't rely on guesses. I called her name softly at first, then louder, walking past the dining area and toward the long hallway leading to the front of the house. The deeper I walked, the colder it got. The warm scent of food faded, replaced with the faint smell of winter air slipping under the doors. That's when I heard it, a tiny breath, shaky and weak, like someone trying to stop themselves from crying. I felt my stomach twist. Following the sound, I moved slowly down the dim hallway, my heart pounding harder with each step, and then I saw her. My daughter was huddled near the front door, small and trembling, her arms wrapped tightly around her body. Her little coat was unbuttoned, her cheeks were red from the cold, and her eyes were filled with silent fear. I dropped to my knees instantly. "Lily? Baby, what are you doing here?" She looked up at me as a tear rolled down her cheek. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Mom, they said there wasn't enough space for me in the living room." In that moment, the faint laughter from the fireplace felt like something cruel and distant. My daughter had been pushed away, left alone in the cold, while everyone else enjoyed warmth and comfort. And nobody cared enough to notice. I held her face gently in my hands, terrified by how cold her skin had become. Her little fingers were stiff, and her sweater sleeves were damp from wiping her tears. "Who told you to stay here?" I asked, keeping my voice calm, even though I felt something breaking inside me. She glanced toward the living room, hesitating. "Grandma said I should sit here because the adults needed space, and Aunt Clara said I was making too much noise." Her words felt like knives. The idea that a child, my child, was treated as an inconvenience on Christmas was something I couldn't comprehend. I wrapped her tightly in my arms, feeling her fragile body shiver against mine. The contrast between the cold hallway and the warmth just a few feet away made the situation even more painful. I could still hear the cheerful crackling of the fireplace, the bursts of laughter, the clinking of glasses, none of which had paused long enough to notice that a child had been exiled. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "You're not staying here another second." I lifted her into my arms and stood up, breathing slowly to control the anger trembling inside me. As I began walking back toward the living room, I caught glimpses of the home's decorations, the perfectly placed garlands, the shiny ornaments, the family portraits on the wall. Everything looked staged, beautiful, warm, yet all of it felt fake. What did decorations mean when the people living among them lacked the basic warmth of humanity? Lily buried her face into my shoulder, still shivering. I rubbed her back, whispering reassurances as we stepped closer to the living room, closer to the people who had allowed this to happen. And with every step, my anger grew colder and sharper. This wasn't just an accident. This was a choice. When I entered the living room with Lily in my arms, not a single person noticed at first. They were too busy with their conversations, their jokes, their steaming cups of cocoa. The fire glowed beautifully, sending waves of heat across the room, heat that could have warmed my daughter if anyone had cared enough to offer her even the smallest seat near it. My husband finally looked up, a confused expression crossing his face. "Where did you go?" he asked casually. As if nothing unusual had happened, I didn't answer him right away. Instead, I looked around the room, my arms tightening around Lily. My mother-in-law smiled politely, unaware or intentionally oblivious. "There you are," she said, with a tone that made my skin crawl. "Does Lily want a cookie now?" A cookie. As if a sweet treat could erase cruelty. I didn't raise my voice, but the calmness in my tone made the room go silent. "Who told her to sit by the door?" The question hung heavy. A few people glanced around, as if the answer might be hiding somewhere on the walls. My mother-in-law's face stiffened. Well, we just needed some space. She was interfering. My husband's aunt added, "Kids should learn not to interrupt adults." She was being loud. My jaw tightened so hard it hurt. Lily looked up at me, eyes wide, hearing every hurtful word spoken about her, as if she weren't even in the room. That was the moment I realized these people didn't see her as a child. They saw her as a burden. And what broke me even more was how normal they made it sound. Like pushing a child aside was just part of holiday tradition. I shifted Lily in my arms and repeated, more firmly this time. She was shivering, alone, in the cold. The room grew uncomfortably silent. Some looked down, others looked away. My husband finally stood up, rubbing his forehead. "You're overreacting," he muttered. The words hit me harder than I expected. Overreacting? Was a child's safety an overreaction? Was basic compassion too much to ask? Lily's tiny hand clenched my sweater tightly, as if afraid someone might send her away again. My heart ached for her. I looked at each person in that living room, people who claimed to be family, and I felt nothing but disappointment. Their fireplace burned bright, but their hearts didn't. I took a deep breath and spoke clearly. My daughter will not spend another minute in this house. A few gasps followed, as if I had insulted their festive decor. Instead of pointing out their cruelty, my husband stepped closer. "Don't be dramatic," he whispered. "It's Christmas." I met his eyes, and for the first time I truly saw the divide between us. Christmas wasn't about food, decorations, or sitting by a warm fire. Christmas was about kindness, inclusion, and protecting the ones you love. If he couldn't understand that, then he no longer understood me. I held Lily tighter, feeling her cold hands slowly warming in my arms. "Relieving," I said, my voice steady. And this time, no one dared to speak. No one apologized. No one even stood up to stop us. Because deep down, they all knew what they had done. As I walked toward the front door, the warmth of the fireplace grew distant, replaced by the quiet chill of the hallway where Lily had been abandoned. Each step felt heavier, but also strangely freeing, as if walking away from that house was the beginning of something important. The door creaked as I opened it, letting the crisp winter air rush in. Snowflakes drifted gently from the sky, settling on the tips of my hair and Lily's coat. She lifted her head and looked at me, her eyes still wet but now calmer, safer. I brushed her cheek and whispered, "I'm so sorry, baby. You deserved better." She didn't say anything, just laid her head on my shoulder, trusting me completely. That trust, in that moment, felt more sacred than anything. My husband didn't follow us out. Not right away. He stayed with his family, torn between the warmth of the fire and the cold truth he didn't want to face. I didn't look back. I walked to the car, buckled Lily in carefully, and wrapped her with my own coat to keep her warm. When my husband finally stepped out of the house, he looked frustrated, confused, and embarrassed, but not genuinely remorseful. That told me everything. He said something about going back inside to fix things, but I knew he meant smoothing things over with them, not addressing the real issue. I shook my head. "You don't fix this," I told him softly. "You learn from it." Then I drove away with Lily, watching the house disappear behind us in the side mirror, its bright lights fading like a memory that was never truly warm to begin with. When we reached home, the atmosphere felt completely different. Quiet, peaceful, honest. I carried Lily inside and immediately wrapped her in warm blankets. I made her hot chocolate with extra marshmallows and sat beside her as she slowly began to relax. The tension in her tiny shoulders eased, and the pink color returned to her cheeks. She looked up at me and whispered, "Are we going back next Christmas?" I shook my head gently. "No, sweetheart. We're going somewhere better. Somewhere where you're loved." And I meant it with every part of my soul. That night, as she fell asleep in my arms, I thought about everything that had happened. I thought about the laughter that never paused, the adults who dismissed a child, the cold hallway that had become her unwanted corner, and the fire that warmed everyone, except the one who needed it most. But I also thought about the moment I chose her above everything else, above expectations, above pretending, above keeping the peace. Choosing her had felt like choosing the truest version of myself. As I watched the snow continue falling outside our window, I realized something simple but powerful. Some houses may have fireplaces, but not warmth. Some families may share a table, but not love. And sometimes, walking away is the only way to protect what matters. That Christmas didn't break us. It reminded us of our strength. It reminded me that my daughter deserved every ounce of love the world had to offer. And I promised myself she would never shiver in silence again. Not in the cold, not in the dark, not in a place where she wasn't valued. Our Christmases would be different from now on. And finally, warm.